Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Not far from where I start my broadcast each day is Coweta County, Georgia. About 45 minutes or so southwest of Metro Atlanta. 145,000 or so residents, and an overwhelmingly red county when it comes to politics. Donald Trump won it by a 66-32 margin, give or take. Let's see. Brian Jack is the congressman who represents the 3rd District of Georgia. He won that county by a 68-31 margin. In November, Coweta County found, and this morning, Coweta County found out. This from this morning's WSB TV Channel 2 Action News.
New this morning, a company planning to open a massive battery manufacturing plant in Coweta County has scrapped those plans. Freyr announced the project at a 368-acre site in November of 2022. The plan was to build a $2 billion battery manufacturing plant there in Coweta County. That project was going to create more than 700 new jobs over a 7-year period. Freyr did not say why they decided to discontinue their plan.
Come on. In the Atlanta Journal-Constitution piece covering this very same story, Freyr pulling out of the Coweta County development, they said in 2022 its customers include large industrial companies and solar developers looking to wean themselves off of fossil fuels. One of its largest early investors was Koch Industries, which invested nearly $1 billion into the startup. Isn't that ironic? The Koch brothers. Koch Industries. They were looking to the future. Getting away from...
Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, that mindset's definitely not going to help. Here's a paragraph that I wanted to zone in on as well from the AJC. Significant pressure has come from China, which has been pumping out cheap batteries. In an interview with the AJC ahead of the 2-year anniversary of the company's Georgia factory announcement, Freyr CEO and co-founder Tom Jensen said the global Western powers need to establish their own battery production chain, which is a sentiment shared by federal and state leaders. Well, at least still state leaders. Jensen acknowledged the challenges, but also continued opportunities. He said, this is regional energy security, and it's securing critical energy infrastructure for the energy transition. That's what he said at the time, the 2-year anniversary, the announcement. If you rely upon or are making yourself reliant on imports of those solutions, that is a security issue potentially over time. Now, listen, they cite other reasons for why they are pulling back on their plans here in the state of Georgia. Inflation, interest rates, competition, blah, 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 blah. And the state had been throwing tons of money their way. When I say throwing tons of money their way, it was one of those deals where, like, there were tax incentives and like $358 million, it says here, in grants, tax breaks, other incentives. The good news is the Georgia Department of Economic Development told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the incentive process protects taxpayers from failed projects because partner companies only receive the bulk of their tax savings upon delivering their development promises. The agreement also includes clawback measures for awarded grants and other inducements. So the state was doing their part. I would argue maybe a bit more above and beyond what they should. But anyway, the money that was promised isn't actually going their way. So the state's not going to be out $358 million, I guess is the point I'm trying to get to. But it cannot be overlooked how these 3 words,
drill, baby, drill,
have an effect on a sector of the economy that had been looking to the future and away from drill, baby, drill. Let's turn to the General Assembly. Under the Gold Dome yesterday, legislation moving through the Senate to ban transgender girls from competing in sports in the state of Georgia. Again, a solution looking for a problem once again. Before that, though, Senator Kim Jackson took to the floor. By the way, she'll be on the show next week. We're looking forward to talking with her. She tried to bring a little bit of equity into women's athletics into the conversation instead of just making this a completely woeful bill that just targets, I don't know, how many? 1, 2? Are there trans females participating in sports and scholastics in the state of Georgia? Again, a solution looking for a problem. Here she took to the floor yesterday.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand here today in front of you as a senator, a priest, a wife, and a mom, and for this conversation, most importantly, as a gay athlete. I stand here today holding gently the struggle between the past and the future. In one hand, the past, where gay and lesbian athletes were forced to hide behind a facade in order to escape judgment, punishment, and the fears of others. A past where we hid so that we could play the sport that we loved and be a part of the team, where we hid in order to be included. And in my other hand, I hold the hope of our future, a future where we've moved past the fears of others and those who are different. It was a long time before enough people saw that gay athletes like me were not bad guys, that letting gay athletes be a part of a team wouldn't hurt the other girls' experiences. It was a long, slow evolution from fear to acceptance, but we did finally get there. If not quite to approval, then at the very least, more tolerance. Tolerance that giving the different a place on a team did not take away from others. And as with all things, the cycle has returned. Later today, we will debate whether or not trans children will be rendered invisible on the playing field. And I want to pause here to just make it clear right now that trans girls, they are here and they are here to stay. I want to be clear and say to all of our girls, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you deserve equal treatment. My heart breaks for the trans children who have to live in this moment, those who feel isolated and unsupported, especially trans kids in Georgia, where this General Assembly has systematically worked to eradicate trans youth. I hold immense grief for the lived experiences of our trans kids and their parents, and all those who love and care about them. And I am willing to keep working to create a safe space for trans children to come down here and to tell their stories, to make sure that our trans girls know that they are loved. And my heart also breaks for cisgendered girls who will be questioned because of SB 1. The girls who, like me, were a little too strong, a little too tall, a little too athletic, just a little too good. Girls who will have to prove that they are, in fact, girls because they are judged and scrutinized for not quite living up to what a girl is supposed to look like. The license to discriminate in this bill and SB 1 will give the right for parents to call out any and every girl that they think might be better than their child and have them prove that they are a girl. I know this grief personally. As a cisgender athlete who didn't conform to the look of certain girl athletes, I know what it is to have your gender questioned. Wow. And I see and I hold space for you and what you will endure because of SB 1. Alongside this grief that I have for our trans and cis girl athletes, I also hold hope. Hope that my colleagues will evolve on this issue. Hope that just as the past has shown us that tolerance and acceptance is possible, that we can move forward. Despite this body's efforts to stop the future from happening, I want to be clear that it's already on its way. In fact, the future is already showing up, and it shows up in the beautiful trans youth that we see here who are sharing their stories and finally feel whole, feel human. The future has already shown up. It's shown up in the joy of our LGBTQ community who continues to spread against all odds our celebration of all things that make us different, unique, and beautifully human. I know that my colleagues will evolve one day and move from fear to acceptance, stepping out of the past and into the future. And I remain ever present and ever hopeful as that day comes when our trans youth can feel safe and loved in our community. With that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
I do have some more audio from Senator Jackson, who sought to add an amendment that sort of eviscerates the entire premise of this bill. Nonetheless, I'll get to that in a minute. From the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Bentley Hudgens quoted the Georgia State Director of the Human Rights Campaign, said legislation such as SB 1 puts all women who don't fit a certain image of femininity at risk of being targeted, as you heard Senator Jackson allude to from her childhood days. Deputized gender police will have devastating impacts on all girls, and this bill increases the potential for discrimination and abuse against young women of color. It is dishonest and misleading to claim to champion women's rights while refusing to take serious action on pressing issues, making women less safe every day. The maternal mortality crisis, domestic and sexual violence, wage inequality, and school safety. Here is Senator Jackson going back to the podium to try and add an amendment to bring a little bit more equity to this bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to draw your attention to my amendment that actually seeks to do exactly what the senator from the 37th talked about, which is to really and truly bring fairness and equality to girls' sports. Yeah. I think I want to start by just naming aloud that for many of us in a post-Title IX world, there probably is this expectation that fairness exists in girls' sports already, that girls get coached in the same level, they have the same access to resources. But the reality is, here in the state of Georgia, girls do not receive equal treatment. They're often assigned teacher supervisors for their sports, people who have absolutely no training at all in coaching the sport. And why is it that they can't find coaches? Well, because there's a pay disparity that exists. This bill amendment that I have seeks to address this and to say if you are coaching, you should be paid based on the time spent in an equal way. We'll take, for example, a football coach often plays about 10 games a season. A soccer coach plays 20. Why is the football coach making 9 times more?
Well, you know why.
There are issues around opportunities for girls to be able to safely practice on playing fields that are regulation size. Right now, today in Georgia, we have girls who are having to practice on rec fields with holes in them, and there are all kinds of ways that they're not regulation size because the boys get priority on the best fields. Right now, this morning, we had girls who had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go practice on their court because they don't get priority practicing time. If we want to really and truly bring equality to girls' sports, it's this amendment that needs to be passed. If we really believe in protecting girl athletes, it's ensuring that they have access to great coaching just like the boys have. You know, there's a senator here who talked about in previous days about a girl in his district who plays on the golf team for the boys. It's not because they don't have a girls' golf team. It's because playing with the boys gives her access to better resources, better coaching, better facilities, better equipment. Title IX was designed to bring equality to girls' sports. And it has worked in many ways. And, you know, we heard senators quote the statistics about how many more girls participate in girls' sports as a result of Title IX. But let me add this little bit of detail to that. We have research that indicates that by age 14, girls drop out of sports at 2 times the rate of boys, often citing reasons including bullying, social isolation, and discrimination based on their real or perceived sexual orientation. Women in their 20s are twice as likely to report safety concerns from their youth sports experiences as those who were in their 40s, citing that they had concerns about injury, safety, and poor coaching. So yes, more girls are playing, but fewer girls, we do not have as many girls playing because they recognize that they don't have equality, they don't have fairness. So, friends, I invite you, this is an easy vote. This is something that we all should be able to agree on. Yep. We've talked about it all afternoon. We believe in fairness in girls' sports. So let's amend this bill to include and to ensure that true fairness exists, that it's no longer a litmus test about whether or not maybe you do a few things to make sure that there are equal number of teams. But instead, we do all the right things to make sure there's fairness in compensation, fairness in access to playing fields, to make sure that girls are being treated with the same greatness in their school media as boys are. This amendment is our opportunity to truly begin to level the playing field in Georgia. With that, I yield the well. I will stand for questions if there are questions.
You do have one question, Senator. Recognize Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Senator yield?
I will yield.
Okay. In terms of, being very pragmatic, costs and benefits, real policy changes that affect real people, can you speak a little bit to the relative proportion of the impact that your amendment would have on fairness in girls' sports relative to what the majority's bill might accomplish in terms of the numerical percentages?
Yeah, so if we look at the majority's bill, which is targeting a very limited group, we have 0.06% of athletes are trans. So you're talking about, you heard that right, 0.06% of students are trans athletes.
Love
so
that.
you're talking about no more. You could count them on two hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that bill impacts our girls.
Yep.
But if you look at my amendment, we're talking about thousands of girls.
Right.
Thousands of girls who grew up just like I did and who have a light bulb moment when they realize, when they're sitting waiting for access to the basketball court until 7 p.m., they realize, wait a minute, I'm not being treated like the boys are.
Yep.
That's what this amendment does. It impacts thousands of girls' lives. And what's more, we know that from statistics, when girls play sports, and particularly when they play for a long time, they grow up to be powerful leaders like the one you see standing in this well today.
That's right.
We know that when girls play sports, they grow up to be CEOs. They are more likely to finish college, more likely to hold leadership positions when girls play sports. This amendment makes sure that girls have a level playing field and increases the likelihood that girls will stay in the game instead of quitting the game because they don't have equal opportunities.
Will the Senator yield for one final question?
I'll take one final last question, my brother.
Senator, what kind of message do you think it would send to girls playing sports in Georgia if the majority passes this bill without your amendment?
If this amendment does not pass, then it makes it clear that the men in this chamber who have stood up and spoken before me from the majority party do not actually really and truly want to bring true equality to girls' sports.
Thank you, Senator.
With that, I yield the well.
And spoiler alert, her amendment was voted down by an 18-34 margin. She shared that vote via photo, via statement, and on social media by saying, by voting down my amendment to include real solutions to equity in girls' sports, my Republican colleagues have shown that their real aim is not, in fact, fairness for Georgia's female athletes. No, the target was, as the senator from Pine Lakes stated, 0.06% of Georgia's K-12 student body. This is The Ron Show, progressive voices via TuneIn and America One Radio. As I mentioned, Senator Kim Jackson and I are going to be having a conversation this weekend that will air on the show probably Monday, I would assume. Looking forward to having that conversation here on The Ron Show. You can follow us at Ron Show ATL on your preferred social media platforms. Threads, Instagram, they're tied together. Twitter, X, Facebook, Blue Sky, we're there, at Ron Show ATL. I was having dinner with a buddy of mine last night. He's a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan, and they have some game going on this weekend. I forget what it's called. Anyway, he wanted me to make a prediction. Who's going to win the game? And, first of all, Philadelphia Eagle, and I love my friend. I love my friend Mike. He's a great guy. He's one of the few Philadelphia sports fans that I can stomach. I can literally stomach being around and talk sports with. Because he knows Philadelphia sports fans are a little crazy. He accepts that. He has self-awareness, right? He also knows that I'm not going to just placate him. He likes being challenged. He wants to know, in my mind, why I don't think his team's going to win the big game. Can I say what the big game is called? The Super Bowl. Anyway, yeah, I can say it because I'm not making money off of this. On paper, the roster's better, blah, 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 blah. You're going up against Patrick Mahomes. Best quarterback to ever play the game, in my opinion. Anyway, the headline that's coming out before the game, though, is that the NFL has decided to take the words "end racism" off the back line of the end zones. Oh my God. The conniption. This is going to be where I'm going to finger wag a little bit to those of us left of center. Folks are freaking out about that. The word end racism, leaving the back of the end zone on NFL football fields, the last one to be played on this season at the Super Bowl. Instead, the words choose love are going on the back of it. The president is, to my understanding, will be attending the game because he loves it. He's like the male Taylor Swift. He's got to get on television. Actually, I think Taylor doesn't want to get on television. She just goes to the games because she has a vested interest. He has no vested interest except himself. But there's the conniption that, well, the NFL's taking end racism off the end zones because he's going to the game. I don't think that's it. And I have a warning. Those of us left of center need to heed when it comes to having conniptions over things like this. Don't take the bait. This is not worth having a conniption over. Stand by, I'll explain why. It's The Ron Show.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
You heard earlier in the show where Senator Kim Jackson, speaking on behalf of actual equity in sports for Georgia's girls, speak to the fact that SB 1, which passed the state Senate, minus her amendment, confronts the scourge that impacts 0.06% of Georgia's student body. Well, athletes anyway. 0.06%. She said you can count them on two hands. Here's exactly what she said.
So if we look at the majority's bill, which is targeting a very limited group, we have 0.06% of athletes are trans. So you're talking about, you heard that right? 0.06% of students are trans athletes.
Love
so
that.
you're talking about no more, you could count them on two hands.
And then I gave you this audio yesterday. Senator Dick Durbin 2 months ago questioning NCAA President Charlie Baker.
How many athletes are there in the United States in NCAA schools?
510,000.
How many transgender athletes are you aware of?
Less than 10.
Okay, Ron, but what about high school? Save Women's Sports, according to Newsweek, a leading voice in the bid to ban transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports, identified only 5 transgender athletes competing on girls' teams in school sports for grades K through 12. 5. Not 5,000 or 500 or even 50. Just 5. And I absolutely hate this legislation that is being passed to target, checking my notes here, 15 trans female athletes coast to coast in the United States. 15. All this legislation, all this hullabaloo, all these signing proclamations, and it's a damn TV show, y'all, to demonize 15 trans girls in the United States. I hate the legislation, but at some point in time, you just have to decide this is not a win right now, and take your lumps and move on. I'm not being dismissive. I'm not saying I don't care about trans athletes. I do. I would love to see any effort whatsoever from Republicans to create a playing field for these athletes. Listen, I'm on a softball league board here in Atlanta, Georgia. For those who don't know, I play softball as often as possible, honestly. My God, the weather's so great this weekend. I got to get out. Anyway, it's an LGBTQ plus softball league. And you know what? We let straight people play. It's very inclusive as is possible. And I can't tell you, trust me, being on the board, it's onerous. It's exhausting. The means with which we try to create equality on the playing field. And I don't mean boys with girls, girls with boys, non-binaries. And we do. We have a women, non-binary, and trans division so that those who want to play just within that bubble can play within that bubble. We have a rigorous, trust me, and arduous, trust me, process for rating players so that they play on a skill level commensurate with others in that same skill level. We go through all of this. We make it work. Women play with men in an open division if they'd like, and or the women's non-binary and trans division. We make it work. We put in the effort. The NCAA, by the way, was also putting in the effort. The International Olympic Committee putting in the effort. They are rigorously testing to ensure that even if a trans female athlete were playing in a women's sport, that the physiology didn't give them an advantage. Oh, and by the way, spoiler alert, there's already physiological advantages in boys sports and in girls sports. You know how I know? I can't tell you how many times I'd go to my high school's football games in the 4 years that I attended high school, and I could see a physiological advantage on the other sideline. My high school is a really good football program now, but back when I was in high school, we won 8 games total, not in one season, 8 games. And 5 of those games came in 1 year. 2 of those seasons, we didn't win a game. It was a physiological advantage on the other sideline, comparable to what our student body could put together. Yeah, that's going to happen. Shaquille O'Neal, physiological advantage. He was a freak on the court. Wembanyama, we just saw this guy, Wemby, playing San Antonio. He was here in Atlanta the other night. He's a freak. He's a physical freak. There are physical freaks. There are going to be physiological advantages and disadvantages in sport. That is now, always has been an issue in sports. And now, with this legislation being passed at the state level and at the federal level, executive orders and whatnot, now you're going to have women who just have physiological advantages over other women. Girls who have physiological advantages over other girls now are going to be creepily scrutinized. Is there are there going to be like literal panty raids? Are we going to? It's creepy, but at some point in time, we have to understand that this is not an issue that can be waged war on, confronted on, and it be politically advantageous. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying put a pin in it. History shows us that when you even take a loss in the moment, at the end of the day or at the end of the fight, what's right wins out. It's a long road. Unfortunate. My question to right-wingers who have been demonizing this small percent, 1% of our overall population, trans in this country? So when you're done with the girls' sports thing, what's next? You made all this noise about trans health care and what did the president say? Gender mutilation, which does not occur before the age of 18. The occurrences are minuscule. So then what? Puberty blockers. Here's the problem with puberty blockers. There are kids, by the way, who start puberty at too early of an age, and puberty blockers are, well, okay, can't now. I started talking in the last segment about the NFL deciding to take the words "end racism" off the back line of the end zone, starting with the Super Bowl. And there are folks on the left who are taking the bait, flipping out, going crazy. I'm not going to watch the game. Please, you're going to watch the game. We're all going to watch the game at some point in time, even if it's just a halftime show. And there are folks on the right freaking out because, oh my God, a black rapper is the Super Bowl halftime centerpiece. Honestly, I love Kendrick Lamar. They not like us. I love Kendrick Lamar. I really do. And I love how he picks beefs with people who are allegedly into minors. But I have to admit, if I'm giving the NFL a little grief, Kendrick Lamar is not a mainstream. He's just not. I worked in radio and the music business for a long time. Kendrick Lamar doesn't have mainstream appeal. This is, I don't know. It's not a good choice. I don't know who I'd have gone with, but this ain't it. My point being, we can't freak out about the words "end racism." You got to pick your battles. Liberals, progressives, moderates, anti-Trumpers. You got to pick your battle. They're not taking the words "end racism" off the end zone backline because Donald Trump's going to show up. That's not why. They're replacing it with the words "choose love." It's not a controversial statement. Can we not choose love? It's not as if the NFL has gone anti-woke. I get it. A lot of corporations have. I get it. There are folks who are now like, can't shop at Target anymore. Okay. And I'm a gay man. I've been particularly perturbed with Target backtracking on Pride merch. I can't go into Midtown Atlanta's Target anymore. Midtown Atlanta, the gayest zip code in the South. Well, maybe not. I think a little town outside of Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors might. But the gayest zip code in the state. I can't go into Midtown Target and get Pride merch because they're afraid some yahoo from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district is going to come to town, see it, and flip a cog and show his ass and endanger employees. Yeah, that's kind of where we are. And Target is backtracking on DEI. It's not a good move. It's not smart business. It's not good for business. There have been studies that have borne this out. Diversity, equity, inclusion, good for business. Okay, let them find out for themselves. I don't need to not shop at Target because of that. I stopped my guy, Travis. I've been seeing him for a little while now. He's like, you can get that at Amazon. I'm like, I can't spend money at Amazon now because, I'm not giving Jeff Bezos money. He's like, oh my God. I know, but I'm not, pick your battles. I guess what I'm saying is liberals, progressives, you got to pick your battles. Freaking out about the words and racism not being on the back of the end zone, that ain't it. What you do need to understand is that the Trump administration, the Donald Trump presidency, the MAGA culture is trying to take your eye off the ball. There's a reason why the flood of executive orders happened. And by the way, where was the media freak out about that? Not just, I don't expect OANN, Newsmax, and Fox to freak out about executive orders unless President Blackestein is president again. And we know that they're not going to let him run for that again. They freaked out about a tan suit. The executive orders, they went nuts. Donald Trump flooded the zone with executive orders. I keep using that term, flooded the zone, because that's what Steve Bannon says exactly what the game plan is. I'll read a clip from Heather Cox Richardson, her notes last night as well. Here's what Steve Bannon said on Frontline a while ago, and Jen Psaki on MSNBC points this out.
I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with three things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover.
4 years later, that's still the strategy. And guess what? Bannon says it's going great.
Not wrong.
He told the Washington Post, quote, it's working. It's just stunning to me what they're doing. And it's not getting covered because it's too much. They're overwhelming the system. So yeah, they're going to keep flooding the zone. They're literally telling us that they're going to do that. They'll do a million crazy things, so we can't focus on any one thing, like whether they are delivering on the core promise they made about lowering costs. But the problem with flooding the zone for them is it makes it kind of hard to answer really simple questions about your agenda, like this.
You campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one lowers prices?
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. More capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our slate of executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time, right?
Relax, everyone. It's just going to take a little bit of time. It's pretty weak tea, at least from how I hear it from the sitting vice president, for what is supposed to be their number one agenda item. And just to put it all in a little perspective, Barack Obama campaigned on ending the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And it took some time, but in his first week of office, that's pretty much what he focused on. Bingo. In every use of power and lever he had.
Yes.
Joe Biden vowed to end the pandemic and bring back the economy from the brink. He spent his first week in office trying to move that agenda forward and telling the country how he was going to do it. Meanwhile, the guy who promised to lower costs for the American people is busy flooding the zone with all sorts of things, as I just outlined, and hosting House Republicans at his golf resort to discuss how they can cut taxes for rich people.
Yeah, that's Jen Psaki again from MSNBC. Heather Cox Richardson noted last night. Brian Stelter posted a December 9, 2017 quote from the New York Times. Before taking office, Mr. Trump told top aides to think of each presidential day as an episode in a television show in which he vanquished rivals. I think about that quote a lot, Stelter wrote. Performative victories, Heather Cox Richardson writes, performative victories over, quote, the libs make MAGA voters happy, But to what end do political leaders distort reality in order to stay in power? Yeah, this is what you got to focus on. This is the sort of stuff, and again, it's just, to me, it's easy pickings to call out bullshit when it's bullshit. Did I bleep that right? I hope I did. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just online radio. You guys aren't going to get an FCC fine. But here's what Heather Cox Richardson dove into leading up to that portion of her notes yesterday. The U.S. has seen high-profile immigrant raids since Trump took office. But Dana Kerr of The Guardian reported that the Trump administration, quote, is gaming Google to create a mirage of mass deportations. And you know what? On the left, we're taking the bait. On January 24, 2025, old online press releases from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, from as much as a decade ago were updated to make Google prioritize them as new releases, thus creating the illusion that raids are taking place all over the country. When The Guardian asked ICE and Google about the changed dates, some of the new dates disappeared, dropping those stories out of the top of search results. Please tell me somebody who's listening to this show all the time heard me say, I had heard somewhere that the numbers seem to be getting gamed. Like they're not as high, there's not as huge spike as you might think. Because I know I said this, and I'm pretty sure I said this on the show, and I did see an article in passing like a couple of weeks ago, like within the first days of the presidency, that the numbers aren't all that higher than what they were before. Please tell me somebody heard that. I know I said it. I'm not going to go back and find it. My God, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack at this point. But we're taking the bait. Next paragraph, Heather Cox Richardson. Since President Ronald Reagan, Republicans have won elections by convincing their voters that their opponents are not trying to use the federal government to help Americans like them, but are instead trying to hand tax dollars and power to undeserving black and brown Americans, women, and LGBTQ plus Americans. Over the past 45 years, she writes, that rhetoric has created a population that believes the federal government is controlled by their enemies, now sometimes called the deep state, whom they blame for destroying the country. Those Republican voters now appear to hate the federal government and to be willing, even eager, to dismantle it, which is what's happening. But the Republicans' vision of the nation never reflected reality, Heather Cox Richardson writes. And now, under President Donald Trump, it is entirely made up. Today, Brian Stelter of Reliable Sources recorded some of the disinformation in which MAGA voters are currently marinating. Trump lied that Elon Musk found that the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, spent $100 million on condoms to Hamas, and that last week's fatal mid-air collision that took 67 lives was due to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Richardson continues. Trump claimed CBS defrauded the public in the greatest broadcasting scandal in history when it exercised normal editing procedures on a 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris that he insisted, falsely, involved replacing her actual answers with others. Thursday, Trump called for CBS News and 60 Minutes to be immediately terminated, despite the fact that the U.S. Constitution protects the freedom of the press. And by the way, CBS released the unedited 55 minutes or so of video footage showing that they did nothing like changing her answers or moving audio. No, it was a completely normal interview. In fact, I shared it at Ron Show ATL on the Twitter X platform so you can see it for yourself. It just made me feel sad that we didn't elect this competent, well-prepared, well-versed, calm, kind woman to lead this country. That racism, bigotry, misogyny, hyperpartisanship won over making the same choice. My God. Watch that at Ron Show ATL on the Twitter X platform. Heather Cox Richardson continues, MAGA is amplifying right-wing lies. Today, influencers, including Musk, claim that the USAID secretly bankrolled Politico. God. Claiming that the media site had taken $8 million, million with an M, not billion, $8 million from USAID. In fact, that sum was not an annual grant, but rather years of subscriptions from across the government to Politico Pro, a pricey subscription service for data and legislative analyses for lobbyists and government officials. It wasn't a handout to Politico. They were paying Politico for a service, a subscription service. God, if there's someone on the federal bankroll who has a Canva account, oh my God, seriously, what's next? Your Canva? They're coming for your Canva, your Adobe Acrobat subscription. Boy, listen. Hey, Elon, you want to find some cost savings? Find some federal officials who are using the expensive Adobe platform versus Canva. Canva's cheap. Hell, you can use it for free if you want. Go for that, and then make a lot of calamity about it. I will share the Heather Cox Richardson notes, by the way, in today's show notes as well at ronshowatl.com. Phew! The show has flown by, and I have like 4 minutes. So I don't really know what to do with it because it's not long enough for me to really dive into something heady. I will say this. A friend of the show, I've had him on several times, Jay Bookman, wrote a compelling column in the Georgia Recorder against the state of Georgia getting into the sports wagering gambit. It's legal in all but 11 states, and Jay Bookman believes that Georgia should hold their ground. I don't have a dog in that hunt. I'm not a gambler. I don't like when I go to, like I went to Vegas once. I've been to Vegas absolutely once. I think I wagered $20. And so for me, it's like, okay, I didn't find a whole lot about Vegas all that exciting. I was there for a softball tournament too, so I was kind of busy. But I don't have a dog in that hunt. I know that sports wagering is big business. I know it brings in a lot of money. I know that like BetMGM, I mean, like sports wagering is prevalent now in sports coverage. And I know this is going to be a huge weekend for it. I just like, I can't get behind pushing for it. And like I said, I know there'll be another push in the General Assembly for this. Republicans and Democrats, there's bipartisan support for it. But I know, like I listen to sports talk radio here in Metro Atlanta, and gosh, the show that I tend to listen to the most is the afternoon show on 680 The Fan, and they're always at Harrah's in Cherokee, or there's another one, Murphy, North Carolina. They're always talking about going to Harrah's, and they sometimes do broadcasts from there. Okay, it's the closest place you can go from Atlanta anyway, and go make a sports wager. Okay, fine, whatever. But Jay Bookman does make a compelling case about how, like, when sports gambling does get legalized in the state, credit scores go down, bankruptcies go up, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I think what I'm trying to say about this particular subject is there seems to be some broad support that this is where Democrats in the House and Senate in Georgia could use their clout, the influence they have, their votes, to actually get something in return. Like, for example, if you're going to push to make sports wagering legal in the state of Georgia, and again, I don't care one way or the other. I really don't. I understand the impacts. I just, at some point in time, personal decisions are you have to have responsibility for your own actions. But here's what I would say, Democrats. What can you get in return for that? Could you earmark the money from sports wagering that the state gets, and that's the lottery. The lottery we got passed because we wanted to pay for college tuition. What if we took sports wagering money and earmarked that for, I don't know, mass transit expansion? Finally, putting some money from the state coffers into mass transit. MARTA is the largest mass transit authority in the country not to get a dime of state funding. We can change that. It's just an idea, just something I'm going to spitball there. I've said this all along. Democrats don't think big. They don't. We haven't since Kennedy and the moonshot. At the end of the day, we don't talk about big things. And I believe that the next gubernatorial candidate for the Democratic Party needs to float a big project, like connecting the state with high-speed rail. And boom, this is one of the ways to fund that. I mean, I don't know what the numbers look like. I don't know what to expect from it. But this is the sort of thing that, like, I think Democrats can use their votes and the influence that they have to get something that the state needs. And then they can take credit for it when we're all avoiding traffic. That's going to do it for today's Ron Show. We air 9 a.m., 5 p.m. weekdays on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, and on the weekends at 10 a.m. on Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. Back on Monday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you then.